They say first impressions matter, but what if the shape of your skull decided how people saw you? For thousands of years, in cultures scattered across the globe, people believed that the way your head looked could tell the world who you were. Sounds bizarre, right? But ancient humans didn't just let nature take its course. They took matters and skulls into their own hands, reshaping them deliberately. Imagine binding an infant's head so tightly that it permanently altered its shape. This wasn't some fringe practice. It was common among the Maya, the Huns, and even in parts of Europe. But why would anyone do this? What was so important about having an elongated head that people would go to such extremes? Okay, let's start with the question: if you saw someone with an elongated skull, what would you think? Maybe you'd assume they were from another planet, right? After all, elongated skulls are a staple of alien conspiracy theories. But the truth is far stranger and, honestly, way more fascinating. Cultures across the world have practiced cranial modification for thousands of years. From the Maya in Central America to the Huns in Central Asia, and even to ancient Europe, people intentionally reshape their skulls for reasons that go beyond what we typically think of as fashion. This practice, often called cranial deformation, wasn't just about standing out. It had deep social, religious, and cultural implications. These altered skulls were seen as marks of beauty, intelligence, nobility, and even divine favor. The process started when individuals were infants, when their skulls were soft and malleable, and required careful, sometimes painful binding techniques. So, why did these cultures go to such lengths? And how did they achieve these dramatic transformations? Let's dig into the history, science, and cultural meaning behind this incredible practice. The real challenge here is understanding why so many different cultures, with no apparent connection to each other, independently developed the same idea, that modifying the shape of the human skull was not only desirable but essential. How did this practice spread so widely? And what were the risks? After all, we're talking about manipulating the human skull, a vital structure protecting the brain. Modern researchers have uncovered evidence of cranial modification in regions as far apart as Central America, Europe, and Asia, dating back thousands of years. But this raises a big question: was cranial modification purely aesthetic, or did it serve a deeper purpose? And here's an even bigger twist: some scientists believe these practices might have had unintended physical and mental consequences. Could altering the shape of the skull actually change how the brain functions? Let's explore the hows and whys of this ancient, mysterious practice. First, let's talk about how it was done. Cranial modification typically started within the first year of life. Because an infant's skull is soft and hasn't fully fused yet, making it pliable. Techniques varied across cultures. In some cases, boards or flat pieces of wood were bound to the head using cloth or rope, applying gentle but consistent pressure. This created a flattened or elongated skull shape over time. Other methods involved wrapping the head tightly with bands or straps to achieve a conical or cylindrical shape. The process could take years, requiring constant monitoring and adjustments to ensure the desired effect. Think about that for a moment. It's not like they had modern medical tools to guide them. One wrong move, and the risks were immense: pressure on the brain, infections, or even death. Yet, people persisted, generation after generation. What makes cranial modification truly fascinating is its universality. Take the Maya, for instance. They associated elongated heads with nobility and intelligence. If you had a long, sloping forehead, it meant you were closer to the gods. In fact, Maya parents went to extraordinary lengths to ensure their children's heads were shaped this way, seeing it as a sign of beauty and high status. In Europe, the Huns and other nomadic tribes practiced cranial deformation as a way to signify group identity. To these tribes, a modified skull wasn't just a personal choice, it was a badge of belonging. It told the world who you were and where you came from. Meanwhile, in Africa, some groups viewed cranial shaping as a way to emphasize certain aesthetic ideals. And here's the kicker, these practices often developed independently. How does that happen? Why did so many cultures, separated by oceans and mountains, come to the same conclusion? Some anthropologists argue it's about the human desire to stand out, to assert individuality or superiority. Others believe it was tied to deeper, almost spiritual beliefs about the connection between physical appearance and inner qualities. Let's switch gears and dive into the science. When archaeologists first unearthed elongated skulls, some skeptics thought they were evidence of an entirely different species of humans. But modern research has confirmed that these skulls were shaped through deliberate human intervention, not genetic mutation. The big question is, did reshaping the skull affect brain function? While there's no definitive answer, some studies suggest that cranial modification doesn't necessarily harm the brain. The skull grows to accommodate the brain's natural development, even if its shape is altered. That said, the long-term effects on cognition and behavior remain a topic of debate. One of the more surprising aspects of cranial modification is its impact on social structures. In many societies, the shape of your skull could determine your place in the hierarchy. For instance, having an elongated skull might elevate you to elite status or mark you as a priest or warrior. But what if you didn't have access to these practices? Could you ever rise above your station? This raises questions about how physical appearance and social mobility were intertwined in ancient civilizations. Now, here's the mind-blowing part. Cranial modification didn't just shape individual lives, it shaped entire cultures. For some, the practice faded into history as societies evolved and merged. But for others, its influence lingers today. Modern descendants of these ancient civilizations still tell stories about their ancestors' elongated skulls, preserving the legacy of a practice that once defined who they were. And get this, cranial modification isn't entirely a thing of the past. In some isolated communities, variations of this practice still exist, albeit in less extreme forms. What does that say about our enduring obsession with physical appearance and identity? It's a question that cuts to the core of what it means to be human. So, why did ancient humans reshape their skulls? Was it beauty, status, spirituality, or something else entirely? The truth is, it's all of the above. Cranial modification was a way to express identity, communicate status, and connect with the divine. It's a practice that reveals just how creative, resourceful, and determined our ancestors were, even if their methods seem extreme by today's standards. But here's the thing, while the practice may seem alien to us, it's a reminder that humans have always sought to shape their world, and themselves, in extraordinary ways.